Hi, folks. Welcome back. Now, we all know America is the greatest country on earth, arguably the greatest in history. For centuries, people have risked everything to get here, chasing the American dream. But now, some are getting hit with a cold shower dose of reality. They're packing their bags and voluntarily fleeing to Haiti. Yes, Haiti. See, under Biden, the borders were wide open, and the opportunists rushed in hoping for handouts. But now that Trump's back in office and actually enforcing immigration law, the gravy train's over. And suddenly it's adios, America. Sayonara. I don't really think they spoke Japanese, but had to throw that one in there. You really can't make this stuff up. We've reached a point where illegal immigrants are romanticizing the war-torn, poverty-stricken countries they once fled. So today, we're diving into what happens when tactical lawlessness crashes into cold, hard reality and consequences, where delusion meets deportation and the punchline flies coach. So buckle up.
I don't want to live in this climate. And despite people would say, despite everything happening in Haiti, it's home. I'd rather be home. I'd rather be home and take care of home and make home better instead of being somewhere that myself and my people are not welcome.
That is just one of the reasons Rebecca Antoine has decided it's time to go.
I had to reflect last year, and I'm like, okay, Port-au-Prince is not getting better anytime soon, but I want to go back.
Another proud product of TikTok activism has decided to self-deport back to Haiti because, get this, she just doesn't feel welcome in the United States. Not because of crime, not because of persecution, not because of war or famine, but because the vibes are just off. And apparently that's now enough to justify a reverse migration to a country with one of the highest poverty rates, where kidnappings are common and civil order is barely holding. So what's actually going on here? Now, to be clear, this isn't just one woman's decision. It's the symptom of a cultural rot that has metastasized into self-hatred masquerading as moral superiority. For the better part of a decade, America's elite institutions, our universities, media, and activist class, have relentlessly pushed the idea that the United States is irredeemably racist, imperialist, and oppressive. When you feed people that narrative long enough, don't be surprised when some of them start acting like refugees in the very country that gave them more freedom, safety, and opportunity than literally anywhere else on the planet. Now, let's be clear. This isn't simply about immigration policy. This isn't simply about asylum or border walls. This is also largely about identity and the left's long game of eroding national pride and replacing it with grievance, guilt, and globalist fantasies. We've raised a generation to believe that America is not a home to be loved and defended, but a system to be dismantled. So now when Trump simply enforces existing immigration laws, something every country has a right to do and does, we're told it's unwelcome, unsafe, or inhumane. Not because it is, but because the left has conditioned people to see discipline as violence and responsibility as oppression. The irony is the very people who lecture us about their lived experience and cultural pride are the first to flee when it's inconvenient, and the first to demonize the country that gave them the platform to complain in the first place. The truth is, America did reject Rebecca Antoine. America rejected the lie that citizenship means entitlement without loyalty, that national borders are optional, that culture is just a vibe. She wasn't kicked out. She walked away because she couldn't cash in on a broken system anymore. And here's the brutal reality. This story doesn't do anything to weaken America. In fact, it strengthens it. It proves that when you enforce the law, the grifters leave. The ideological squatters who never saw this country as a home in the first place, only as a host, it's clarity in the most necessary way. Because what we're seeing isn't just migration, it's the peeling back of Democrat delusions. And that's what the left fears most, not deportation, but exposure. That when the checks stop coming and the rhetoric stops working, people will have to choose, build something real or retreat into fantasy. Rebecca chose fantasy. And for once, that's a decision we can actually respect because she finally acted like America isn't hers to remake. It's ours to protect. And in other news of people who are trying to remake America in their image, here is the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, who in the last few days got caught on camera, more like confessed on camera, that he was purposely discriminating against non-blacks in the giving out of government contracts as well as hiring. So let's see what more nonsense he's confessing to now.
You know, as far as, the president's animus towards women, people of color, working people.
What are you talking about?
We have always known who he has been. This is not a surprise. He's a monster. Period. We have the most diverse administration in the history of Chicago, and he is threatened by that. You can tell when someone is fearful is because they act out. We have a president that is screaming and having tantrums right now because we have an administration that reflects the city of Chicago, but he would much rather have administrations that reflect the country club.
The diversity narrative isn't happening anymore. Nobody's buying it. It's over. The country was founded on merit, and that's still a core American value. No matter how many times the left tries to manipulate people into believing that racial grievance should outweigh competence, common sense cuts through the noise. And what we're seeing in Chicago right now is the moment that fantasy collides with federal law. Now, what we just witnessed was Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who somehow makes his predecessor, Lori Lightfoot, look like a centrist, had a full-blown meltdown because the Department of Justice is investigating him for racial discrimination in hiring. Yes, the same people who scream about equity and inclusion are now furious that the federal government is asking whether they broke the Civil Rights Act, the very law they claim to worship. Now, let's just back up for a second. Johnson had proudly touted just days earlier to a church audience that he prioritizes hiring black people because, in his words, they're the most generous people on the planet. It's not a qualification. That's a stereotype dressed up as virtue. And it's not just cringeworthy, it's illegal if used as a hiring practice. Imagine a white mayor saying they only hire white people because they're the most hardworking or honest. You wouldn't just see outrage, you'd see indictments. And yet, when the roles are reversed, we're told it's progress. This is the rot of identity politics. It replaces equality with favoritism, fairness with tribalism, and public service with ideological nepotism. Johnson isn't just defending his hiring decisions. He's framing basic legal accountability as racist oppression. He calls Trump a monster for enforcing civil rights law. Let that sink in. We've reached the point where the left calls it fascism when the government insists that job applicants be judged on merit rather than melanin. Can't make that stuff up. But here's a deeper issue. Johnson's tantrum is a product of decades of institutional conditioning. Academia, HR departments, media, and political machines have spent years embedding the idea that diversity isn't just a value, it's the highest form of good. Not diversity of thought, by the way, just skin color and gender checkboxes. And when that worldview finally meets the brick wall of legal standards and real-world consequences, people like Johnson don't reflect. They just lash out like children. Now, let's talk about projection for a second. Johnson accuses Trump of having tantrums, of being afraid of diversity, while he's the one literally crying on stage because someone dared question the legality of his race-based hiring. That's not courage. That's just fragility. And it's not leadership either. It's grievance theater. The last resort of an ideology that's run out of intellectual steam. The truth is, most Americans, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, don't want a government that hires based on pity points or virtue signals. They want competence. They want results. They want city departments that function, streets that are safe, and budgets that make sense. What they don't want is a mayor who thinks being diverse is an accomplishment in and of itself, especially when that diversity translates into exclusion, division, and dysfunction. This moment is a turning point. It shows the cracks in the equity agenda. It shows that even under Trump, yes, especially under Trump, there's still a line that the law won't let you cross, no matter how many hashtags you slap on it. And if the DOJ follows through here, it'll be one more signal that the era of ideological immunity is ending. The rules have to apply to everyone, even progressive mayors with God complexes and victimhood scripts. So no, Mr. Johnson, you don't get to cry racism when you're the one pushing race-based hiring policy. You don't get to weaponize identity and then play martyr when the system pushes back. And the American people see through it. The narrative is crumbling. The mask is off. And merit is making a comeback. And speaking of unhinged leftoids, the security footage exposing a Milwaukee judge who assisted an illegal immigrant to evade ICE agents has been released, and it is exactly what we expected.
He meets his attorney in the hallway and walks towards Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan's courtroom. Along the way, he passes plainclothes federal agents who are sitting on a bench. They are there to detain him. After Flores Ruiz walks by, the agents turn to each other and appear to confirm his identity amongst themselves. But a few moments later, Judge Dugan and another judge approach the agents sitting on the bench. A criminal complaint against Dugan later said she was alerted to their presence by a court official. That complaint says during this interaction, Dugan and the agents disagreed over the type of warrant they had to arrest Flores Ruiz. According to the complaint, Dugan ordered the agents to go to the chief judge's office. Video shows her pointing them through a double door. She then turns back to speak with other agents further down the hall and orders them through the doors as well. Shortly after that, with the agents gone from the hallway, Eduardo Flores Ruiz and his attorney exit into the hallway through a different door. As they walk down the hall toward the elevators, they pass another plainclothes federal agent. Neither they nor Judge Dugan seem to have noticed at the time. That agent motions to another to follow Flores Ruiz. Security video shows Flores Ruiz exiting through a basement exit. Upstairs on the 6th floor, the other agents have left the chief judge's office and worked their way downstairs. Flores Ruiz left the building onto 9th Street. Videos of the street shows the agents catching up to him. Flores Ruiz runs across 10th Street while trying to get away, but the agents catch him and arrest him.
Leftism is a mental illness. There's really no other way to describe the kind of moral derangement we just witnessed out of Milwaukee. A sitting judge sworn to uphold the law was caught on camera actively obstructing it, deliberately misleading federal agents in order to help an illegal immigrant flee custody. This isn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a premeditated act of judicial sabotage, coordinated from the bench of a courtroom that's supposed to serve justice, not spit in his face. This judge, Hannah Dugan, didn't just express an opinion about immigration policy. She weaponized her position to interfere with a federal arrest, sending agents on a wild goose chase through her courthouse hallways so that a man in this country illegally could make a run for it. And when ICE caught up with him outside on the street, she had the audacity to plead not guilty later when confronted with this crime. What she's really guilty of is exposing the rot that has infected our legal system from the inside. Because this isn't just about one judge. This is the logical endpoint of decades of ideological capture, where the rule of law is seen as optional, where federal authority is dismissed as fascism, and where personal feelings are elevated above public duty. We got here because the left spent years treating law enforcement like villains, borders like abstractions, and legal immigration like a human rights issue rather than a legal one. And now we're watching the fallout happen in real time. When lawbreakers are painted as victims and law enforcement is treated like the enemy, it's only a matter of time before the people inside the institution stop enforcing the law and start undermining it. And that's exactly what Dugan did. She wasn't enforcing due process. She was staging an escape route, a coup. She didn't misunderstand the warrant. She challenged its legitimacy because she personally didn't agree with it. That's not judicial discretion. That's activist derangement. And let's be clear, if a conservative judge had done the same thing, let's say mislead federal agents to protect a January 6th defendant or a pro-life protester, the media would be calling for their disbarment, their prosecution, and their public shaming. But because this case involves an illegal immigrant and a progressive judge, we're told it's complicated. But it's not. It's corruption, plain and simple. And it's a slap in the face to every immigrant who followed the legal process to become a citizen. The people who actually respected the laws Dugan decided to ignore. The left likes to say no one is above the law unless, of course, that person is on their team. Then it's about context, trauma, or some systemic injustice. But this moment strips away all that rhetorical fluff. It shows exactly what happens when ideology is allowed to trump integrity. And it should terrify anyone who still believes the courtroom is a neutral space. Because when a judge can act like a coyote in a robe and face no immediate professional consequence, the institution is broken. Dugan's trial is set for July. It should be a slam dunk, hopefully. The footage is clear. The intent is obvious. The only question is whether the system has enough backbone left to hold one of its own accountable. If it doesn't, then we'll know just how far the rot has gone. But if it does, if justice is actually served here, it may be a turning point. A sign that the fever is finally breaking, that we're finally drawing a hard line between law and lunacy. Because at the end of the day, this isn't even about politics. It's about whether America still believes in the rule of law or whether we've surrendered to the rule of feelings, filtered through identity and enforced by activists in black robes. The choice is ours, and the clock still ticking. And speaking of bad judgment, you can't have a segment on that without talking about Whoopi Goldberg. What nonsense is she spewing out now?
Trust issue.
There has always been a mass trust issue because politicians, media, nobody does what they're supposed to do. Now, I say, for me, listen, he's 83, so he's a little stumbly, he's a little rumbly. I can't point to anything that he's done as that he did.
No, he's been running for his next 4 years.
But I'm saying, I want, not you, but I want somebody to tell me, well, when did you know it was bad? If you knew, why did you wait?
Yeah. So can I answer that?
Can I get in?
He
for a
said
second?
that it was after he moderated the debate.
Can I
yes,
get
but that's not, I'm sorry, baby. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you're telling me that hundreds of people knew that he was not able to do his job, then where the hell was everybody?
What we're witnessing with Whoopi Goldberg isn't just denial. It's a symptom of a much deeper illness in American culture, the death of accountability in service to the narrative. Here's a woman, a media figure with one of the largest platforms on daytime television, earnestly asking in 2025, when exactly people realized Joe Biden wasn't mentally fit to be president. As if the slurred speeches, the forgotten names, the wandering off stage, the handshaking ghosts, and the multiple times his staff had to physically redirect him weren't enough. As if Americans didn't spend 4 years watching the leader of the free world decline in real time while being gaslit into silence. This isn't even a political question anymore. It's not even about Biden. This is a litmus test to see how honest you actually are. It's about how much truth the American left is willing to sacrifice to keep a story alive. And the story, the only story that matters to them, is that their team is morally superior, eternally righteous, and always justified. The facts, optional. Reality, always negotiable. And public trust, well, that's collateral damage. And Whoopi isn't alone in this. Her comments reflect a broader cultural rot that now defines elite institutions where loyalty to narrative overrides loyalty to the public. This is what happens after years of media training audiences to confuse activism with journalism, feelings with facts, and optics with truth. It's not that they didn't know Biden was declining. Everyone knew. The DNC knew, the corporate media knew, foreign leaders knew, Whoopi knew. They just didn't care because in their worldview, Trump was the bigger threat. So hiding Biden's decline became a moral obligation. What Whoopi is inadvertently admitting here without realizing it is the scale of the deception. She's not asking why Biden struggled. She's asking why no one stopped the charade. She's asking, where were the adults in the room? And the answer is simple. They were too busy calling anyone who raised questions a conspiracy theorist or danger to democracy. Whoopi was one of them. She was doing this. The people who told the truth got silenced. The people who lied got promoted. And the American people, well, we got stuck with a president who couldn't finish a sentence without a teleprompter. That is, until Trump showed up and changed everything. This moment matters because it forces a reckoning with the system that enabled all of this. The media didn't just fail. It colluded. It participated actively to promote that lie. It became a PR arm for the Democrat Party, and the cultural institutions from Hollywood to higher ed followed suit, with people like Whoopi ignoring what's directly in front of them and performing loyalty instead. Loyalty to the party, to the script, to the tribe. That's what it's about now. Not truth, not leadership, just pure theater. But here's the good news. All of this is falling apart. In 2025, the American people are no longer pretending. Trump's in office. And that didn't happen in a vacuum. We're just sick of this. That was a backlash to this very kind of gaslighting. It was a collective exhale of a public so tired of being told our eyes are lying to us. And now, as Democrats scramble to rewrite history and distance themselves from the Biden era, clips like Whoopi's will serve as a monument to how far they were willing to go to protect that illusion and hold on to power. So no, Whoopi. You don't get to ask, where was everybody? Like you weren't a part of the machine. You were in the middle of it every day on television, lying to the American people. Like you didn't spend years mocking the people who tried to sound the alarm. You literally host a show that helped run cover for the presidency built on denial. You were there, you saw it, and you did nothing because narrative mattered more to you. And that's the story of the modern left. They're not just wrong. They're willfully blind, institutionally dishonest, and ideologically insulated from consequences. But the curtain's down, and Oz is looking really sick. And the audience is awake for the first time. And the performance, well, that's about to end. Curtain call. Might as well just move your butt out there and enjoy the applause while you still got it. Because at some point, nobody's going to be applauding for that.
So, South African President Ramaphosa paid a visit to the White House yesterday, which turned into a surprise presentation on conspiracy theories
of a
white genocide in his country. Take a look.
You have many people that feel they're being persecuted and they're coming to the United States. So we take from many locations, if we feel there's persecution or genocide going on, to allow them to take land.
Nobody can
and then
take
when
land.
they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No, there is
nothing happens to them.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately, through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people. And we have now...
The farmers are black. The farmers are not black. I don't say that's good or bad, but the farmers are not black.
Oh, my God! So between ambushing Zelensky and this, why would world leaders continue to come to the White House?
Okay, well, first of all, this is the problem with getting all your information from Laura Loomer and Elon Musk. Yeah. Because this is what they're going to deal you. And it was false conspiracy theory.
The View is the greatest example of the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and the modern left is incapable of crossing their own narrative long enough to be honest. Whoopi Goldberg and her table of ideological ventriloquists decided to gaslight the American public yet again by calling the documented persecution of white South African farmers a conspiracy theory. Why? Because President Trump had the audacity to say out loud what millions have seen with their own eyes. The violence, land seizures, and political scapegoating are very real and disproportionately targeting white farmers in South Africa. This isn't made up, by the way. There's extensive video evidence available. And in the interaction that they showed, Trump showed a 6-minute uncut video exposing not only the rhetoric, but the actions that he confronted the South African president on. So let's be clear. This isn't just some fringe internet rumor. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the South African government's own data confirm that farmers, many of them white, have been targeted, robbed, tortured, and murdered in brutal attacks. But because acknowledging this doesn't serve the left's intersectional victim hierarchy, they hand-wave it away as right-wing paranoia. The bodies pile up, the farms are seized, but according to The View, it's all just Fox News fever dreams and Elon Musk's X feed. This is how the narrative machine works, for anybody wondering how Whoopi can claim she didn't know about Biden's mental decline. They filter every event through the lens of race and power, then deny any reality that doesn't fit the script. In their world, oppressors can't be victims. And if white people are being attacked, it must be either a coincidence or just their fault, or retribution for historical years of oppression. And if you question that logic, you're labeled a conspiracy theorist, a racist, or a fascist sympathizer. But here's the truth they don't want to confront. What's happening in South Africa is a warning. When a nation starts replacing justice with revenge and redistributive ideology with racialized violence, it doesn't end with one group being targeted. It ends with the whole country collapsing. South Africa's government has openly flirted with policies like expropriation without compensation, which is just a sanitized way of saying legalized theft based on skin color. That's not justice, by the way. That's ethnic revenge dressed up as progress. And when President Trump calls it out on the world stage, no less, it's not a diplomatic blunder. It's leadership. It's truth-telling in an era where lying is a job requirement for most Western elites. He didn't just confront Ramaphosa. He confronted the global culture of denial that's enabling this sort of madness in South Africa. Because if we can't name persecution when we see it, any persecution, then we forfeited the moral authority to talk about human rights at all. And the left's response, well, they clutch their pearls, of course. They insult the messenger and double down on their insane fantasy. But here's what they can't escape. The footage is real. The statistics are real. The asylum requests from South Africa refugees are very real, and the moral rot exposed by their denial is just as real. This moment reveals something bigger than a policy debate. It shows the left's absolute dependence on controlling perception, because the moment they lose that grip, their ideological house of cards collapses. That's why The View has to mock, deflect, gaslight, and straight up lie about what's happening in South Africa. Because if they admit even once that their narrative isn't the whole truth, then everything they've ever sold about race, power, history, injustice, all of it starts to unravel, and it is exposed for what it is, just one huge, very badly orchestrated lie. So let's stop pretending. This isn't just about one talk show. It's about the cultural elites who treat suffering as valid only when it's politically useful. It's about the moral cowardice that calls evidence conspiracy just because it's inconvenient to their narrative. And it's about the Americans who are also waking up and refusing to play along. Truth doesn't need permission from Hollywood to exist, and persecution doesn't need the right race label to be real. It just is. And pretending otherwise doesn't make you progressive, it just makes you complicit. So the question isn't whether you believe the facts, it's whether you're willing to see through the system built to make you doubt them. How many lies have we swallowed because they were dressed in empathy and broadcast by people who claim to care, but are getting paid a lot of money to put on that theatrical display? How much truth have we ignored because it didn't flatter our politics or fit our preferred storyline? At some point, you have to decide, are you loyal to reality or to the narrative that makes you feel the most comfortable and safe? Because what's collapsing around us isn't just policy, it's discernment, it's integrity, it's the cultural spine that once separated right from wrong. If we can't name what's directly in front of us when victims are rebranded as oppressors and silence is sold as virtue, then we're not in a debate anymore. We're in a delusion. And the longer we live in it, the harder it becomes to wake up. So ask yourself, who's profiting from your confusion, and what will it cost if you never stop to question them? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.